quadruped hip extended hamstring curl. So the quadruped position is going to be on our hands and knees, and we're going to talk about the hamstring muscle and why we're in this position, going into hip extension, and then doing like a knee flexion or a hamstring curl. Our hamstring muscle is a two joint muscle, meaning it crosses our hip joint and it crosses our knee joint. And of those muscles, there's a couple different muscles that make up the hamstring muscle. Some of them wrap around to the inside of the knee, some of them wrap around to the outside of the knee. So in this motion in particular, we're trying to bias the hamstring a little bit further down the chain at the knee. So if we go into hip extension, our glute is fired and the hamstring up high is fired to help create the hip extension. But if we point our toe, it'll help take our gastroc out of it, which is one of our calf muscles. And if we go into flexion, it's going to allow us to have the hamstring active. Now, when you're on your hands and knees, you have gravity coming straight down. So you get the glute working, the hip working, and then you have that hamstring down at the knee joint working, which is exactly what we're going for. This is a really common movement to see a ton of arching that's happening. So in the intro video, you saw it done from my hands to where I like to start on the ground to point the toe, go into hip extension, and I'm trying to prevent any rotation in my trunk or any arching in my trunk. And then I go into a curl, and I'm coming up as high as I can, and I'm trying my best not to let my knee drift out wide. So I'm trying to keep like the bottom of my foot parallel with the floor to where the inside of my heel is not pointed toward the floor and the outside of my heel is not pointed toward the floor, to where I could balance like a plate or something on my foot. And that's important just because it helps us load the hamstring group a little bit more symmetrically. Now, if I'm someone that really struggles to be able to do the motion without compensating, I can come down to my elbows, okay? So when I'm in this position, I have the hip extension, and then I go into the hamstring curl, come back out of it. Hip extension, hamstring curl, because I'm on my elbows and usually we'll rock back, and that will give us a little bit of hip flexion, and it locks up our low back. So it's way harder to compensate essentially by overarching that low back as you go into the curl portion. So again, you should feel this a little bit in your hip, hardly anything in your back, but the majority of the contraction should be happening down and around that knee joint.